The coffee was cold again. Dr. Robert Nash didn't mind. He had stopped noticing such things hours ago. His eyes were fixed on the strange readings dancing across his monitor at Deep Space Monitoring Station Beta, floating silently in Earth's orbit. "That's impossible," he muttered, running the scan again. The signal was still there, pulsing from somewhere beyond Neptune's orbit. It wasn't radio waves or any other known form of communication. It was something else, something that made his instruments struggle to understand what they were seeing. He reached for his phone, hesitated, then picked it up anyway. It was 3 a.m. Earth time, but this couldn't wait. "Get me Admiral Hayes," he said to the AI operator. "Priority 1. While he waited, Nash pulled up more data. The signal was growing stronger, and now other instruments were picking up strange readings. The space around the signal seemed to bend, like light passing through rippling water. "Dr. Nash." Admiral Linda Hayes's voice was sharp despite the hour. "This better be good." "Admiral, I'm sending you the data now. We've got something out there, past Neptune. It's like nothing we've ever seen before." There was a pause as she reviewed the information. "Could it be a malfunction?" "No, ma'am. 3 different systems are picking it up now." And he trailed off, watching new data pour in. "It's moving." The signal was indeed moving, faster than anything should be able to travel. Nash's hands flew over his keyboard, calculating its trajectory. His face went pale. "It's heading toward us, Admiral, and it's not alone." The next 12 hours were chaos. Nash barely left his station as more signals appeared. Earth's most powerful telescopes turned toward the approaching anomalies, but the images they sent back made no sense. It was as if space itself was being twisted around them. Military vessels from every major nation began moving into defensive positions. The United Earth Space Force carrier Hyperion, under Captain David Foster, led the front line. Nash watched through Station Beta's cameras as ships took up formation, their hulls gleaming in the sunlight. The first real sign of trouble came when communications began to fail. It started with simple static, but quickly grew worse. Emergency channels stayed open, but anything pointing toward the approaching signals went dead. "Dr. Nash," Admiral Hayes's voice crackled through his speaker. "We're getting reports of power fluctuations across the entire fleet. What are we dealing with?" Before he could answer, his screens lit up with new warnings. The signals had crossed Jupiter's orbit, moving faster than ever. Now they were close enough for better readings, and what Nash saw made his blood run cold. They were massive, each one larger than Earth's biggest cities. Their shapes seemed to change as he watched, like living things made of darkness itself. Where they passed, stars seemed to dim. "Admiral." Nash's voice was steady despite his fear. "These things, whatever they are, they're absorbing energy. All kinds of energy. Light, heat, radio waves, everything. It's like they're feeding." The first clear images reached Earth, broadcasting across every channel still working. Humanity's first look at the visitors stopped conversations mid-sentence and made hardened soldiers step back in shock. They were ships, but not like anything human minds had imagined. They seemed to be made of overlapping plates of some dark material that swallowed light. Tentacle-like appendages longer than battleships waved from their surfaces. Where they moved, space itself seemed to bend and tear. Nash watched as Captain Foster's ship, the Hyperion, moved to intercept the closest entity. Standard first contact protocols were broadcast. Simple mathematical sequences designed to demonstrate intelligence and peaceful intentions. The response came moments later. It wasn't mathematics. It wasn't any form of communication humans had ever encountered. The sound that came through every speaker and communication device was like a scream from the depths of space itself, a noise that made people cover their ears and computers crash. Nash ripped off his headset, but he couldn't forget what he'd heard. That sound hadn't just been noise. There had been something behind it, something vast and hungry and utterly alien. "Admiral Hayes," he said, his voice shaking slightly, I don't think they're here to talk." As if to confirm his words, the nearest entity suddenly accelerated. Its massive form moved with impossible speed toward the Hyperion. Captain Foster barely had time to order evasive maneuvers before the thing reached them. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and Earth's best weapons seemed as useless as throwing stones at a hurricane. Captain David Foster watched in horror as the dark entity wrapped its massive tendrils around the UES Ravager, one of Earth's most powerful warships. The ship's shields flickered and died in seconds. Then the darkness spread, covering the vessel like ink in water. When it cleared, the Ravager was just gone. No explosion, no debris, nothing. "All ships, fall back," Foster ordered through the emergency channel. "Maintain distance from these things." But falling back wasn't easy. The void entities, as Dr. Nash had started calling them, moved faster than any human ship. 3 more vessels disappeared in the next few minutes, swallowed by the impossible darkness. On the bridge of the Hyperion, Foster's weapons officer shook her head. "Sir, our railguns aren't even reaching them. It's like the projectiles just vanish before impact." Foster gripped his command chair as another explosion lit up space. The UES Thunder, trying to run, had overloaded its engines. The nearest void entity absorbed the explosion like it was drinking light itself. "Engineering," Foster called. "What's the status of the experimental shield system?" "Online, sir," came the reply. "But we've never tested it in combat." "It might." The ship rocked violently. A tendril of pure darkness had wrapped around the Hyperion's rear section. Warning lights flashed across every console. "Activated. Now." The experimental shield hummed to life. It was different from standard energy barriers. It used quantum fields to create a bubble of altered spacetime around the ship. As the shield activated, the dark tendril seemed to slip away, as if it couldn't quite grip the protected vessel. "Sir," his science officer called out. "The shield is working, but power consumption is massive. We have maybe 10 minutes before we drain our cores." Foster watched as another Earth ship vanished into the darkness. They had started with a fleet of 30 ships. Now only 7 remained, scattered and running. "This is Captain Foster to all remaining vessels," he broadcast. "The experimental shield works. Fall back to Earth. We'll hold them off as long as we can." On Earth, Dr. Nash watched the disaster unfold through station beta sensors. Admiral Hayes stood behind him, her face grim as ship after ship disappeared from their screens. "The Hyperion's shield is our only effective defense," Nash explained, pointing to his readings. "These entities, they don't just absorb energy, they absorb everything. Matter, radiation, even the space around them seems to get eaten." "Can we duplicate the Hyperion's shield?" Hayes asked. "Maybe, but it would take time. And look at this." Nash showed her new data. "The shield isn't really stopping them. It's more like they can't quite see the ship when it's active, like it's shifting slightly out of their reality." The Hyperion's shields were failing now. Foster ordered his ship to make random jumps, using their last moments of protection to gather data. He watched as the void entities spread out, creating a web of darkness between Earth and the rest of the solar system. "Send this to command," Foster told his communications officer. "Full sensor data, shield specifications, everything. They need to know what works and what doesn't." Just then, something new appeared on their screens. One of the void entities had changed shape, forming what looked like a massive eye. It turned toward Earth, and every computer system on the planet stuttered for a moment. In Station Beta, Nash grabbed Hayes' arm. "Admiral, look at these readings." When that thing turned toward us, there was a spike in, well, everything. Like it was scanning us. But more than that, it was scanning our minds. Hayes was already moving. "Get me the president, and contact Colonel Parker at the Neural Research Division. If these things can affect our minds, maybe we can affect theirs." The Hyperion's shield finally failed. Foster watched the darkness approaching his ship, and made his last transmission. "This is Captain Foster. The shield concept works, but needs more power. They're not invincible. They're afraid of something. Something about us scares them. Find out what it is." Then the darkness reached for his ship. But instead of the quick absorption they had seen before, something strange happened. The entity seemed to hesitate, pulling back slightly when it touched the residual energy of the quantum shield. In that moment, Foster felt something. A vast, cold consciousness touching his mind. And in that brief contact, he understood two things. These entities could be fought, and humanity would need to become something more than it was to survive. Then the darkness swallowed his ship, and the void entities turned their full attention to Earth. Colonel Amy Parker stood in the underground lab, watching through thick glass as technicians prepared the first blade unit. The ship looked small compared to normal space vessels, barely larger than an old fighter jet. But size didn't matter anymore, not with what they had learned. "The neural link is ready," Dr. Nash said, checking his tablets. He hadn't slept in 3 days, but his hands were steady. "Are you sure about our pilot choice?" Parker nodded. Marcus Wilson was the top of his class in the Space Force. More importantly, he scored highest in the psychic sensitivity tests. Above them, the void entities had spread across Earth's orbit like a web of living darkness. Regular ships couldn't get past them. Even missiles disappeared before reaching their targets. But today, they would try something new. Wilson walked into the prep room wearing a black suit covered in delicate silver lines. His face was calm, but his eyes showed excitement. This was humanity's best hope, and he knew it. "The suit will connect your mind directly to the ship," Parker explained as technicians attached sensors to Wilson's head. "You won't be flying it. You'll be becoming it. Like Captain Foster's quantum shield," Wilson said, remembering the last transmission from the Hyperion. "But better." Nash stepped forward. "The void entities react to consciousness. That's why they pulled back from the Hyperion at the last moment. Foster's mind, enhanced by the quantum field, made them hesitate. With the blade system, we're taking that to the next level." Wilson lay down in the neural link chair. As the technician started the connection sequence, Parker watched his vital signs on the main screen. Everything had to be perfect. "Beginning neural sync," Nash announced. "Marcus, remember your training. Don't fight the connection. Let it flow naturally." Wilson closed his eyes. At first, nothing seemed to happen. Then the small ship in the launch bay began to hum. Its surface rippled like water, responding to Wilson's thoughts. Neural sync at 40%, 60%, 85%. Nash read the numbers with growing excitement. "It's working." Wilson gasped. His eyes opened wide, but he wasn't seeing the room anymore. He was seeing through the ship's sensors, feeling its systems as if they were his own body. "This is incredible," he whispered. "I can feel everything. The air currents in the launch bay, the Earth's magnetic field, even the void entities up there." His voice changed slightly. "They know we're here. They can feel us too." Parker leaned forward. "Are you ready for launch?" Wilson nodded. The ship, his new body, tensed like a runner before a race. "Launch in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The blade unit shot upward through the secret tunnel to the surface. It moved with impossible grace, making turns that would have torn a normal ship apart. Wilson wasn't using controls. He was simply willing the ship to move, like moving his own arm. "First contact in 30 seconds, Nash reported, watching the tactical display. A void entity had noticed them and was moving to intercept. Wilson felt no fear. The neural link filled him with confidence. As the massive dark shape approached, he could sense its surprise. It had expected another simple machine. Instead, it found a human mind wrapped in technology it couldn't understand. The void entity reached out with its energy-absorbing tendrils. Wilson didn't try to dodge. Instead, he pushed his consciousness forward, just as they had practiced. The blade unit glowed with a strange light. Not energy the void could absorb, but pure human will made visible. The entity pulled back. For the first time, one of them retreated from a human ship. It worked. Parker's voice came through the neural link. The entity can't process a direct consciousness attack. Wilson pressed the advantage. Wilson pushed forward again. The blade unit responded instantly, its surface rippling with patterns of light that matched his thoughts. He felt the void entity's confusion, its fear. These were not mindless eating machines. They were intelligent, and they could be frightened. "All stations," Parker announced, her voice filled with hope. "Project Blady is successful. Begin mass production immediately. Humanity has a weapon." But as Wilson returned to base, he felt something strange through the neural link. A whisper from the void, a fragment of thought from the entity he had faced. These things weren't just hunting. They were running. And whatever they were running from was coming. He kept that thought to himself as they disconnected him from the system. Humanity had won its first real victory against the void. That would have to be enough for now. Marcus Wilson was not alone anymore. 11 other Blade pilots flew with him, their ships moving like silver fish through the darkness of space. Each pilot could feel the others through their neural links, their minds touching lightly as they prepared for humanity's first real attack. "Remember," Wilson said to his team, "these entities can be hurt. They can be scared. We are not prey anymore." Below them, Earth looked small and blue. Above, the void entities spread across space like a black net, still absorbing any normal ships that tried to break through. But the blade units were different. They glowed with a strange inner light, the visible form of human consciousness made strong by technology. Admiral Hayes watched from the new command center deep underground. "All blade units report status," she ordered. "Blade 1, ready," Wilson responded. The others followed, their voices steady despite the pressure. Dr. Nash stood beside Hayes, monitoring the neural link readings. "Their sync rates are holding steady," he reported. "The improvements to the system are working." The largest void entity hung above Earth's North Pole, its massive form twisted into shapes that hurt the eyes. This was their target. If they could drive this one away, the others might retreat. "Begin attack pattern Alpha," Hayes commanded. The blade units moved as one, their pilots shared consciousness making them perfectly coordinated. They split into 3 groups, approaching the void entity from different angles. The entity noticed them. Its form rippled, and dark tendrils reached out to grab them. But unlike the normal ships it had destroyed before, these vessels slipped through its grasp. The pilots' minds burned bright, pushing back against the void's hungry touch. Wilson led his group straight toward the entity's center. Through his neural link, he could feel its alien thoughts. It was ancient, powerful, and for the first time in centuries, it felt fear. "Now," Wilson shouted. All 12 blade units fired their consciousness beams, not energy weapons, but focused beams of pure human will. The void entity screamed. The sound didn't come through their radios, but through their minds. It tried to pull away, but the blade units followed, pressing their attack. "It's working," Nash called out, excitement in his voice. "The entity's form is destabilizing. It can't maintain its shape under a focused consciousness attack." Wilson pushed harder, directing his team to hit the same spot again and again. The void entity's surface began to crack, showing strange lights underneath its dark shell. But then something unexpected happened. As the entity's defenses broke down, Wilson suddenly saw images in his mind. He saw stars he didn't recognize, vast fleets of ships like the void entities, and something else, something that made even these cosmic horrors flee in terror. "Wilson, your neural link is spiking," Parker's worried voice came through. "Pull back." "No," Wilson said through gritted teeth. "I can see. I can understand." The void entity was trying to communicate, not with words or signals, but with pure thought and memory. It showed Wilson worlds it had consumed, the energy it had absorbed, but also the thing it feared, a darkness greater than itself, a hunger that could swallow galaxies. Wilson made a decision. Instead of just attacking, he opened his mind fully to the entity. The other pilots felt his choice through their links and followed his lead. For a moment, human consciousness touched the void entity's ancient mind directly. Understanding flowed both ways. The entities saw humanity's determination, their refusal to be consumed. The humans saw the entity's fear, its desperate flight across space. The entity's form suddenly collapsed in on itself. But instead of attacking, it pulled away from Earth. The other void entities responded to some silent signal, drawing back as well. "They're retreating," Hayes said in disbelief. "All void entities are moving away from Earth orbit." Wilson watched them go, his mind still full of the images he had seen. "They're not just retreating," he said quietly. "They're giving us space to prepare, because what's coming is worse than anything they could do to us." As his team flew back to base, Wilson could feel the changes in himself and the other pilots. The neural links had awakened something in their minds, some potential that had always been there but never used. They were becoming something more than human, and they would need every bit of that new power for the real war that was coming. The nightmare came again. Marcus Wilson saw endless darkness, felt the cold touch of ancient minds, and heard whispers that made his skull ache. He woke up in his quarters at the Blade facility, his sheets soaked with sweat. He wasn't alone. Down the hall, other pilots were waking up too. The neural links had changed them. Even when they weren't connected to their ships, they could feel each other's thoughts and fears. Colonel Parker found him in the cafeteria an hour later, staring at untouched coffee. "Bad dreams again?" she asked, sitting across from him. "They're getting stronger," Wilson said. "And it's not just dreams anymore. Watch this." He held up his hand, and his coffee cup slid across the table without him touching it. Parker tried to hide her shock, but Wilson felt her surprise anyway. The pilots were developing abilities that shouldn't be possible. They could move things with their minds, sense each other's thoughts, and sometimes see glimpses of faraway places. Dr. Nash burst into the cafeteria, his tablet showing strange readings. "We need to talk," he said. "All of you." In the main conference room, all 12 Blade pilots gathered. They sat in a circle, and everyone could feel the energy humming between them. They weren't just pilots anymore. They were becoming something else. "Your brains are changing," Nash explained, showing them scans on the big screen. "The neural links didn't just connect you to the ships. They woke up parts of your minds that were always there, just sleeping. Like the void entities," Wilson said. "They use consciousness as a weapon. Now we're learning to do the same thing." One of the pilots, Sarah Mills, spoke up. "I saw something last night. Not a dream. It was real." She paused, looking scared. "I saw through one of their eyes. The void entities. They're still watching us, waiting." Admiral Hayes walked in, her face serious. "We've detected new signals," she said. "Something massive is moving toward our solar system, bigger than the void entities." Wilson stood up. The other pilots rose with him, moving as one. They could all feel it now. A distant darkness, a hunger that made the void entities seem tiny in comparison. "The real enemy," Wilson said. "The thing they were running from." Nash checked his readings again, looking worried. "Your powers are growing faster than we expected. We don't know what the final result will be. You might lose your humanity entirely." "We're not losing our humanity," Wilson said firmly. "We're becoming what humanity was always meant to be. The void entities showed us that. They've seen civilizations rise and fall across the galaxy, but they've never seen anything like us." Parker watched as the pilots communicated without speaking, their thoughts flowing between them like electricity. "Can you still pilot the Blade units?" she asked. "Are you still in control?" Wilson smiled. "The ships are part of us now. We don't need the neural link equipment anymore. Watch." He closed his eyes. In the hangar below, his Blade unit came to life, its surface rippling with patterns of light. The other pilots did the same, and soon 12 ships were hovering without any physical connection to their pilots. "This is what we needed to become," Wilson said. "The void entities aren't our real enemy. They were our teachers, showing us what we could be. Because something worse is coming, and normal humans couldn't fight it." Admiral Hayes looked at her changed pilots with a mixture of hope and fear. "How long do we have?" 2 weeks, Wilson and the others said together. "We can feel it coming, and we need to teach others before it gets here. Humanity needs more bloody pilots, more awakened minds. The process might kill them," Nash warned. "The changes are dangerous. Being unchanged is more dangerous," Wilson replied. "We've seen what's coming. Normal weapons won't work. Normal minds can't comprehend it. We need to wake up the power in more humans, as many as we can." The pilots stood in their circle, their minds linked, their powers growing. They were no longer just humanity's defenders. They were humanity's next step, the bridge between what humans were and what they needed to become. And as they felt the approaching darkness, they knew time was running out. The real war was about to begin, and humanity would either evolve or die. Dr. Nash hadn't left his lab in 3 days. The signal he'd first detected months ago was playing on his screens again, but this time he could almost understand it. The void entities weren't just communicating. They were trying to warn humanity. "Look at this," he said as Admiral Hayes walked in. The original signal wasn't an attack message. It was fear. Pure, simple fear. Wilson and 3 other Blade pilots floated in the middle of the room, their feet slightly off the ground. They didn't need chairs anymore. Their powers had grown so strong that gravity was more of a suggestion than a law. "We can translate it now," Wilson said, his eyes glowing faintly. "The void entities, they're like cosmic refugees. They've been running for thousands of years from something they call the Mind Eater." On the main screen, Nash played the signal again. This time, thanks to the pilots' enhanced minds, the strange patterns made sense. They showed images of entire galaxies going dark, not from having their energy consumed, but from having their very consciousness stripped away. "The void entities consume energy to survive," Sarah Mills, another pilot, explained. "But this thing, it consumes consciousness itself. Thoughts, memories, souls if you want to call them that. It leaves nothing behind but empty shells." Admiral Hayes studied the data with a grim face. "How long until it reaches us?" 10 days, Wilson said. "But we have a chance. The void entities never fought back because they didn't know how. They only knew how to run and hide. Humans are different. We fight." Colonel Parker burst into the lab, her face excited. "The new training program is working. We've awakened the powers in 50 more people. They're not as strong as the original 12, but they're learning fast." "And the void entities?" Hayes asked. "They're still up there," Wilson said, pointing to the ceiling. "Watching. Waiting. They want to see what we'll do. They've never seen a species develop powers like ours so quickly." Nash pulled up new readings on his screen. "The Mind Eater is changing course. It senses the awakened humans. We're drawing it here faster." "Good," Wilson said, surprising everyone. "Let it come, because now we understand what we really are, what humanity was always meant to be." He waved his hand, and a hologram appeared in the middle of the room, showing Earth and the approaching threat. The Mind Eater looked like a storm of darkness larger than Earth's moon, filled with flashing lights that hurt the eyes. "The void entities evolved to consume energy," Wilson explained. "The Mind Eater evolved to consume consciousness. But humans," he smiled, "we evolved to adapt, to change, to become whatever we need to be to survive." "And what do we need to be?" Hayes asked quietly. "Something new," Wilson answered. "Something that can fight back against a force that eats minds. The void entities showed us the way without meaning to. When they consume energy, they don't destroy it. They transform it. We can do the same thing with consciousness. Parker looked worried. The new pilots are already changing, like you did. Some of them are scared. They should be, Sarah said. We're not just changing our minds. We're changing what it means to be human. But we don't have a choice. Normal humans can't fight the Mind Eater. We need to become something more. Nash's computer suddenly lit up with warnings. The void entities. They're moving. All of them at once. Everyone watched as the massive dark shapes that had haunted Earth's orbit for months began to move. But they weren't running away. They were forming a line, a wall of living darkness between Earth and the approaching threat. They're not running anymore, Wilson said softly. They're choosing to stand with us. Through their enhanced minds, the pilots could feel the void entity's thoughts. For the first time in their ancient history, these cosmic wanderers had found something that gave them hope. Humanity's transformation showed them that evolution didn't have to mean only destruction. Send word to all Blade facilities, Hayes ordered. Begin full awakening protocols for all qualified candidates. We have 10 days to build an army of evolved humans. Wilson nodded, his eyes on the approaching darkness. 10 days to become something new. 10 days to save not just humanity, but every conscious being in this galaxy. The final battle was coming, and its outcome would decide not just Earth's fate, but the future of consciousness itself. The Mind Eater came like a storm of endless night, bigger than anything humans had ever faced. It filled the sky with darkness that made the void entities look like shadows at noon. Wilson and his 300 awakened pilots waited in their blade ships, their minds joined in a network of pure consciousness. Remember your training. Wilson's thoughts reached them all. We're not just fighting with our ships. We're fighting with who we are, what we've become. Behind the blade ships, the void entities formed a second line of defense. Their massive forms rippled with strange energies, ready for the first time in their ancient history to stand and fight rather than run. Dr. Nash and Colonel Parker watched from the command center as reality itself began to bend around the approaching enemy. It's trying to consume space itself, Nash said, his voice shaking. The Mind Eater isn't just a creature. It's like a living hole in the universe. Admiral Hayes stood straight, watching her screens. All Blade units, prepare for contact. Humanity stands with you. The Mind Eater struck first. It sent out waves of darkness that made normal humans fall to their knees, their thoughts turning foggy. But the Blade pilots were ready. Their evolved minds pushed back, creating shields of pure consciousness that glowed like new stars. Wilson led the first attack. His ship moved without engines, pushed by the power of his mind alone. The other pilots followed, their ships dancing between the Mind Eater's tentacles of dark energy. Where they flew, they left trails of light that cut through the darkness. Now, Wilson commanded, just like we practiced. 300 human minds struck as one, focusing their power into a beam of pure consciousness. The void entities added their strength, transforming the energy they had consumed over centuries into a weapon. The Mind Eater screamed. The sound wasn't physical. It shook the thoughts of every living thing on Earth. But instead of breaking under the assault, the pilots pushed harder. It's working. Sarah called out. The creature. It's never faced unified consciousness before. It doesn't know how to consume minds that work together. But the Mind Eater was ancient and powerful. It lashed out, its darkness wrapping around several blade ships. The pilots inside felt their thoughts begin to fade. Wilson didn't hesitate. He opened his mind fully, connecting to the trapped pilots. Through him, all the pilots joined together, sharing their strength. The void entities sensed their plan and added their power to the network. In the command center, Nash's instruments were going crazy. The energy readings, this is beyond anything we've ever seen. They're not just fighting. They're changing the rules of reality. Wilson felt the change coming. Humanity had created the blade system to fight the void entities, but that was just the first step. Now, joined with the very beings they'd first fought against, They were becoming something entirely new. "Let go of what you were," Wilson told his pilots. "Become what we need to be." The blade ships began to glow, brighter and brighter, until they looked like newborn suns. The void entities merged with their light, their ancient knowledge combining with humanity's evolutionary leap. The Mind Eater sensed the change and tried to retreat. For the first time in its existence, it felt fear, but it was too late. The light from the combined forces of humanity and the void entities spread out like a wave. Where it touched the Mind Eater, the creature's darkness transformed. It wasn't destroyed. It was changed. Its hunger for consciousness turned into something new. When the light faded, the Mind Eater was gone. In its place was a field of softly glowing particles, each one containing a spark of transformed consciousness. "What did we do?" Admiral Hayes asked in wonder. "What humanity does best," Wilson answered, his voice somehow coming from everywhere at once. "We adapted, we evolved, and we helped our enemies evolve too." The pilots returned to Earth changed. They weren't quite human anymore, but they weren't alien either. They had become bridge builders between different forms of consciousness, guardians of awareness itself. The void entities stayed too, no longer running, no longer consuming. They had found a new purpose as teachers, helping humanity understand its new place in the cosmos. "This isn't the end," Wilson told the gathered leaders of Earth. "It's the first step. Humanity answered the void when we were needed most. Now we'll answer the call of the entire universe." Above them, the stars seemed brighter than before, waiting for humanity to bring its light to the darkness between them.